My name isn't important, but what is important is that man. I'm a 15-year-old male who became interested in spells at 13. I've spent the whole time between those ages experimenting with spells. Most turned out to be for summoning, and others were curses. I devoted nearly a month trying to cast a curse on someone I wasn't particularly fond of. It succeeded, but that same night, I saw a man. He was dressed in a pitch-black trench coat and plague doctor's mask. He was only visible because of a slight glow coming from my charging phone. He didn't say a word, just stood and stared. I tried to ignore him by going to sleep, but the feeling of being watched became stronger. I woke up to him nearly a foot away from my face, breathing heavily. He then stood and walked through the wall he was facing. That was my only encounter with him until about a month later. I was looking in the mirror after taking a shower. I saw him, standing behind me. This time, he spoke. "How do you continue?" I didn't think about answering the question until he demanded me to do so. He angrily yelled, "Answer my question." My only response was that I didn't know. I waited to see if he wanted anything else from me. He said nothing. I turned to leave, and he was gone. I checked the mirror again, and he wasn't there either. Since then, I've perpetually felt like I was being watched. I've seen him on street corners, other seats at school, restaurants, and in mirrors as well. He continues to speak to me, but I never respond. For those getting interested in spellcasting, I would strongly advise against it. This may seem far-fetched, and you might think it sounds a little crazy, but here goes. I'm not crazy, by the way. There's a lot of context behind this to show my mentality, that this was not a form of sleep paralysis. The first time I saw a UFO was 10 years ago. I saw it with my sister. It was triangular and had white lights under each corner. That interaction alone was weird enough, but I don't want to dive too much into it. Essentially, I have had experiences with alien aircrafts and paranormal things alike. Thought you guys should know that first. Now, back to what happened. Last year, in 2017, sometime in November, I took a trip to a games convention. A group of friends and I rented out a motel room while we were down there for a week. This happened on the night we were there. I was sleeping in the same bed as my partner at the time. Now, I've had experiences with sleep paralysis my entire life. I don't think anyone could convince me otherwise that what I saw had anything to do with sleep paralysis. I remember sleeping, obviously, but I don't remember having any dreams. Out of nowhere, I suddenly woke up, but my eyes didn't open. I had this really strange and odd feeling about my surroundings. I knew immediately something wasn't right. Still, with my eyes closed, I felt this pressure on the side of my head. I was sleeping on my left side. It was right at my temple, and it felt like someone was pushing their fingers into it. While this was happening, simultaneously I remember answering questions. I don't know what they were, but I was responding and giving answers. It felt as though it was through my subconscious. In my head, I saw this blast of color from a dark void. It would look like a gas cloud, many clouds actually, colors of orange, white, and purple, I think. It also had stars throughout it. That alone freaked me out. I couldn't move at this point, and my eyelids were incredibly heavy. As I started to attempt to open my eyes, I could see something standing right next to me. I looked up as much as I could, and to my horror, that's when I saw it. Right next to me, this big, black-eyed alien was staring right at me. The motel room was dark, but from what I saw, this being had greenish-brown reptile-like skin. It didn't look like a crocodile, but you can tell it was reptilian. It had massive black almond eyes slanted upwards, and had a small head. It didn't exceed too far beyond his eyes. He had this suit on, which was changing colors, almost like he was trying to morph into the surroundings. Kinda like Mystique. Needless to say, I freaked the heck out. My first reaction was to fight it off. I managed to lift my arms as much as I could and started to fight it off. It backed away slightly and turned to the left, then proceeded to walk down towards the end of the bed. He was only around 4 feet tall. It felt as if my body was vibrating. Not the kind of vibration that you get from a PS4 controller. It was like bass from a car. I felt heavy. My entire body was vibrating, but I still managed to lift myself up from the bed and sit up straight. If I had to put another feeling to it, I felt drugged, like someone had two low speakers on either side of me, blasting it, causing me not to be able to move. As I got up to the top to see where the alien went, I blacked out. Woke up instantly afterwards, feeling rested, and still in the same position as when I had my interaction with the alien. My boyfriend said he didn't feel anything or see anything that night, but he believed me. Needless to say, my mentality broke after that. I got into a severe depression, and my anxiety was so bad, I started to contemplate suicide. I also got derealization disorder, which went on for about a month, feeling like an avatar in a massive simulation. This was about 1 to 2 months after my interaction. My broken mentality at the time was enough to convince me that what I had experienced was real. Firstly, I feel it is incredibly important to make sure I tell my story in complete context. This happened in 2014. I was 27 years old. My wife and I were running a young adult ministry with a few friends from our church. Despite being a Christian, or perhaps even in part because of it, supernatural stories, events, and movies always interested me, just as they do to this day. There is something that has always been inside of me that longs to see proof of the supernatural, the good, bad, and the ugly. The Bible is filled with supernatural occurrences, but in all my life, though I yearned for an experience of my own, I had never had a supernatural encounter with the dark side until this night. I'm a Christian now, as I was then, and it may seem strange to hear that a Christian would want a supernatural experience with darkness. I hope this seems strange to you, and I hope that you don't want this. However, there is something validating about the darkness in this world, and the world beyond this one. After all, without darkness, there can't be light. I had been doing a lot of praying. One of my friends who was leading the ministry had come over what seemed to me to be some sort of supernatural pushback. Strange things started happening. Things banged into his car while driving on the freeway without any signs of what hit it. I had also been seeing a lot out of the corner of my eyes, only to look and see nothing. I always brushed these events off, but they happened with a frequency that was hard to ignore during that time. I always justified these events as, maybe my mind is just messing with me, but now that I look back at it, I wonder if that was actually the case. So one night, I went to bed, just like any other night. The strange thing is what happened next. I began to dream at some point during the night. I dreamt that I was sitting on my bed. My wife was sitting next to me. We were on a Skype or Google Hangouts call with a friend who was leading the ministry. I don't remember any words spoken to this point, but then I realized we were on a three-way call, and there was a Latino woman in a teal shirt with dark brown hair as the third party in the call. The screen switches from my friend's face to the woman's face, and her body starts to almost slither. She is in the sitting position, but her body starts to move in an almost slithering fashion, not side to side, but back and forth like a viper or a rattlesnake about to strike. It was the strangest thing to see. I turned toward my wife as she turned toward me, and we both said, "She's possessed," at the same time. When I turned back to the screen, she began speaking some old language. I don't remember what it sounded like, only that I thought it was Hebrew or Aramaic or some other dead language of the sort. I didn't know what to do, but within a moment of her starting to speak, I felt my consciousness move to the back of my head. It was so strange, surreal, odd, and terrifying. I felt as if I no longer had control of my body and something had taken my place. The feeling was so real, and honestly, it scared the crap out of me. I heard myself speaking, like I didn't even feel my mouth move. That's how disconnected I was from my body at the time. I only felt like I had taken the passenger seat and something else moved into the driver's seat and started using my body. The language I was speaking was similar. Might have been Latin, Hebrew, Greek, Aramaic. I probably wouldn't recognize one from the other anyways. Whatever the language was, I had no idea what I, or whatever was in my body, was saying. I felt terrified, but whatever had taken my body was speaking back to the woman on the other side of the laptop screen. I honestly can't say if whatever took over my body was friendly or an enemy of whatever demon had possessed this other woman. I was so preoccupied, freaking out in the back of my head, that I couldn't pay attention to anything else. As soon as my body started speaking in this other language, I immediately began praying to Jesus in my head. I had no other recourse. All I remember is thinking, Jesus, help me. Please, Jesus. Jesus, please. Not the most eloquent prayer, but it seemed to do the trick. I didn't get put back into the driver's seat in my dream. However, I woke up. As soon as I woke up, terror was upon me. I think it was from the dream, which would make perfect sense. However, when I tried to move, another terror came over me. I couldn't move a muscle. At this time, I had not ever heard of sleep paralysis, but that is exactly what happened to me. I struggled to move a finger, an inch, anything. I couldn't move at all. I felt like there was a dark presence in or approaching the room. But that once again may have just been my head messing with me. I just kept praying my prayer for Jesus to help me, and after what I assumed was a minute or two, I was finally able to move my limbs, and I prayed. When I shared this dream and experience with one of my friends, he said it sounded like the Holy Spirit had taken control of my body to expel the demon from the woman. I don't know if that is anywhere near the truth. That is not what it felt like to me at all. Then again, I may not have conveyed it as well as I originally should have. One of my friends who's more of a naturalist told me, it's sleep paralysis. It helps you not act out your dreams while you sleep. Afterwards, I looked up the phenomenon, and quite frankly, I don't buy it. Of all the nightmares I've had in my life, it only happened to me on this one that was very supernatural in nature. I have had some other dreams since that have supernatural events, but nothing so terrifying as a feeling of losing control of your entire body to another being altogether, like what happened that night. Thanks for joining us around the campfire. If you enjoyed the story, subscribe below. Also, hit that notification bell to be notified of our new stories as they are posted. If you have a story you'd like to share for narration, submit it via email, and you may be hearing your story next. Our email address is in the description box below. Thank you, and good night.